Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the LDM show. On today's show, we're going to be discussing a really amazing topic. The topic of, is belief in a creator natural, or is this something which is taught by society?
And so as the wheel turns, we have come full circle in responding to what was the first and possibly most important video response I've ever created on this channel to iERA. Not only did it set me on the path of refuting iERA's London Dawah movement on a regular basis, the claims made in this video hold a specific importance to me to this very day.
So, how would you summarize this argument from nature, argument from fitrah?
Cool. So, Bismillah, what we're basically saying is that we don't need any arguments to prove the existence of God. Point number one. Because it's a properly basic belief. Right? Now let's break down what we mean by properly basic belief. When we say a properly basic belief, what we're saying, it's a belief that doesn't require any other beliefs. It's not based on any other beliefs. Okay? And also it doesn't require any information transfer. Now we'll look into this just to explain a bit further as to what we mean. Now, in comparison, a properly basic belief that we believe in, that science uses, an assumption that science is based on, is that the real world exists.
The real world is real.
Yeah, and you can't prove it, right? But you have to accept it to do science.
Yeah.
Okay? Another example is what Bertrand Russell shared. What he said was that you cannot disprove this concept that the world that we live in began 5 minutes ago, and it has just this inbuilt memory of it showing or making it appear like that the history has aged to it. Our history has aged to it. You can't disprove this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you won't believe it because it doesn't make sense. You will believe that the history of the world is very, very long. It's old in age, right?
That's a properly basic belief.
It's a properly basic belief, right? And you're justified in believing that.
Except these foundational assumptions, not properly basic beliefs as you call them, are held for two main reasons. Reason 1. The alternatives are far more assumption heavy. Reason 2. Said assumptions are required for day-to-day functioning. Dealing with the first, we must acknowledge that all we have ever observed has been this universe in its seemingly real existence. That is all the evidence we have to go on. It may be fake, that is true. I could be a brain in a jar with probes sticking out of it firing off electricity. I could simply be a character in a book, or this could be the Matrix. But the whole reason they are brought up as could-bes is because in the absence of evidence for said extraordinary claims, there is no justification to believe. Both of these claims presuppose such things as other universes projecting fake ones, or universes which form in a perfect order as opposed to emerging in chaos to build up complexity over time. These assumptions weigh down said positions, weakening them. As for my second point, so what if I am a brain in a jar? So what if the universe was formed yesterday? How do either of these things affect my experiences right now of pain, love, joy, or sorrow? I think, therefore I am. That is a true properly basic belief, as it's a self-verifying statement. To suggest that I just ignore said thoughts because there's some mystical possibility that this is all not true just doesn't cut it. So from the foundational assumptions you put forward, we can reduce what you are terming as properly basic beliefs for the duration of this conversation to share two distinct qualities. They must be necessary to continue functioning, and they must be the least assumption burden position available. Now, how you propose to fit the belief in God into either of these categories, let alone both of them, is beyond me.
What I'm arguing is that the belief in God, believing in a creator, is also a properly basic belief, just like these properly basic beliefs, basically.
Okay.
Right? So what do we mean by information transfer? What we're saying is that these beliefs, they're base core beliefs which don't require any external information to come in. Right? So no one has to come to you. If you were on a desert island, no one has to come to you and tell you that God exists. Naturally, you will grow up believing in a God, that God exists. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. What if somebody says, I have a belief that there is a pink elephant,
right,
and this is the properly basic belief?
Good point.
And,
Very
they,
good
and
point.
they try and refute you.
Very good point. Okay, let's go back to the scenario of being on a desert island, right? Say you were on a desert island, you grew up there without any external influence, anyone coming in and teaching you or telling you anything, right? Like I said, you will naturally, and this is supporting evidence, which we're going to go into at the end, naturally you'll grow up believing in a creator.
Sure.
Right? But you won't naturally grow up believing in a pink elephant that created everything, or a blue rhino, right?
So you're saying there has to be some information.
Someone has to come in from the outside world and say, hello, Sabur, there's a pink elephant or a blue rhino that's created everything. Someone has to tell you this for you to believe this. You won't naturally come up with this concept, right? So it doesn't require any information transfer. That's why it's a properly basic belief.
Okay.
Right?
Except the scenario described here is nothing like the properly basic beliefs discussed earlier by either you or me. A properly basic belief is not a belief held without social or even biological input. It's a belief that does not require an external input in the sense that it's self-verifying. You can have or lack knowledge, yet this has no effect on whether a belief is self-verifying or not, only the belief itself does. On top of this, the earlier understanding of properly basic you gave does not match the example either. Even if a belief in a deity was innate and did not require social input, that would not be a foundational assumption, as it's simply a belief held due to biological predisposition and environmental factors. Not it's a belief held because it's necessary and is the option least assumption burdened. Ergo, the scenario described fits neither the true properly basic belief or your described foundational assumption. All it means is that you had biological or environmental input over social one. Other examples of this include the innate belief that objects stop existing when no longer visible. Babies have to learn object permanence, i.e. the belief that objects maintain existence when out of view. Said object permanence is not an innate belief. However, said lack of object permanence is neither self-verified nor is it necessary and the least assumption burden position. To show God is truly properly basic, you must demonstrate how the declaration of God is self-verifying, and to show him as a foundational assumption, you must demonstrate that they are necessary and the least assumption burden position. So even if you could prove this claim about the Fitra, it would not help you in any way. And the very fact that you have attempted to supply evidence proves that said claim that God exists is not self-verifying, like I think, therefore I am.
Thank you for clarifying that. And actually, when we speak about properly basic beliefs, something it reminds me of is in the Quran, Allah asks all of mankind, all human beings, even the people watching the show right now, and Allah asked, am I not your Lord? And we all said, Richard Dawkins, Hitler, you, me, everyone said, yes, we have testified.
Yes.
And what's really, really amazing is that every single language in the world has a word for God.
Yes.
It might not necessarily have a word for demons or devils or vampires or something like this, something strange, but there is definitely the word God, Allah.
Yes. It's
God.
very interesting because there's many communities, tribes around the world that we don't even hear about. But when people have gone into these tribes and they've seen that these people believe in a higher power, a supreme being, a creator, because it's natural, right? It's a natural belief. That is a core belief, like we were saying.
Except this does not stand up to scrutiny whatsoever. There are groups out there which have been isolated for so long that they have not developed religion or even the most basic language to describe a deity. They lack a word for God entirely beyond that which has been brought to them by missionaries in recent decades. One such example is the Petrovich people found in the Amazon. They lack any and all religion, believing in what they and others can observe. And that last part is really central to their culture, as every statement made must be prefixed with a declaration of source, i.e. I heard, I saw, or I was told. And having no sense of a deity, as well as this factor, has resulted in missionaries failing to convert them, unlike native populations who do have previous religious tendencies. Whenever they present the gospel or any other religious text, the ultimate question comes down to, how do they know? Because the Petrovich people have not been socialized to offer special privilege to certain beliefs in society, they make for one of the hardest challenges any young missionary can face, and have actually resulted in missionaries like Daniel Everett deconverting. Now I'd like to hear Christians excuse how a man who travelled thousands of miles to a different continent and through thick jungle to spread the gospel was never truly a Christian and hadn't read the scripture with the desire to learn its secrets. But anyway, I digress. The fact is that this case and others falsify the idea that belief in a deity is innate through biology and environment. What's more is it displays that if religious beliefs are not socially taught to have special privileges, then it's near impossible to make people believe through peaceful means. You see, even if a family lives in the West or elsewhere, history has ensured some aspects of religion still invade their day-to-day lives in wider society, offering a false sense of privilege or authority. However, that means religion is merely living on borrowed time.
And there's some supporting evidence as well.
Before you go on to that, I want
Yeah.
to quote a hadith which I actually have here.
Sure.
The Prophet, peace be upon him, said,
Yes, sir.
"Every newborn child is born in a state of fitra. Then his parents make him a Jew, a Christian, or a Magian, just as an animal is born intact." Right?
You know what's amazing here? Is that this was mentioned when?
1400
Over
years ago.
1400 years ago.
That is natural.
Recently, individuals like Justin O. Barrett from Oxford, right?
Okay.
And he studied children. Oxford University.
Okay.
Right? He studied children for over, I think, 10 years. He's published several books on this topic. What he said, Born Believers being one of them, what he's showing is that the belief in God is absolutely natural. Atheism is unnatural. To claim that God doesn't exist, this is unnatural. And he showed the example of children being left on a desert island, hypothetically speaking, and growing up themselves. They will naturally grow up believing in a creator. Now this is a scientific study, right?
Is he the one who's written Why Would Anyone Believe in God? I think that's another book.
Yeah, that's another book.
Except he has not published any such study. Instead, he has solely published his supposed findings in a non-peer-reviewed book, which does not equate to a research article in a peer-reviewed journal. Now, the research did take place as the fact that he was funded by the John Templeton Foundation states. Said organization seeks to warp science in order to shoehorn religion and spirituality into discussion. This fact could possibly explain part of Barrett's reasons for not publishing his work in a peer-reviewed journal article. The conflict of interest here is massive and would have to be declared openly in said journal piece. A book does not have this standard, therefore it allows him to escape it. And Barrett has responded with hostility to the conflict of interest being called out by other researchers, claiming that it's merely an attack on motives as opposed to his research. The irony of this is, we can't critique his research as we don't know his sample, his methods, his controls, all these vital details a peer-reviewed journal article has to offer. His conscious decision to publish in a book has prevented such review. Secondly, conflict of interest is no mundane issue. Andrew Wakefield was the man who linked autism to the MMR vaccine in a dubious study of 12 infants. It turns out later that a group of lawyers were funding his research, and the same lawyers then used said sensationalized study, which ignited the anti-vaxxer movement and put hundreds of thousands at risk of disease, to try and sue the creators of the vaccine. He was being paid to fabricate a study to enable his funders to gain money through legal action, not to mention aid competitors to the MMR vaccine, and in doing so resulted in unnecessary suffering and even the deaths of countless people. But as if that wasn't enough, in attempting to fend off Grayling, he compromises the position you just asserted, claiming, and I quote, "Had Grayling attended the seminar as Brown did, or read my book, Why Would Anyone Believe in God?, he would have known that I did not say religion is hardwired or innate, rather that children have propensities to believe in gods because of how their minds naturally work." So what he was actually talking about in the book you mentioned was the way in which a child's mind functions in their undeveloped and untrained form makes them open to the superstitions of religion. Not its innate, but they are more likely to be indoctrinated. That is why the Peterhouse people are seemingly immune to faith-based arguments, because they were not socialized to give a faith-based belief preference before they left the early state of mind. You have to infect them with some form of God virus, even if it's just preserving respect for religion, during the 4 to 14 window. Beyond this, the American evangelicals acknowledge that conversion, even in a still predominantly religious society, is difficult. It's a nostalgia-based attack, the ultimate appeal to emotion. Even if someone has always been raised as an atheist in, say, the UK or the US, they've likely been brought up to have some innate respect for religion, which does explain the very few conversions which take place. So in light of the evidence that has been displayed here, consider the argument from Barrett butchered.
There's really amazing, I think, another psychologist, Dr. Olivera Petrovich, and she says that atheism is an acquired position, right? Meaning your default position, the position that you're in before you change, is theism.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, she is actually an atheist. And also we're going to put the link for her.
All the references
yeah,
and the links
yeah,
will
they're all
be
going to be in the
description
videos.
box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, she's not an atheist, she's a Christian. She is so much a Christian, in fact, that she has a chapter in an apologetics book called One Incarnate Truth, Christianity's Answer to Spiritual Chaos, in which she attempts to warp science to match superstition. However, we haven't even got to the most embarrassing aspect of this video, and that is the supposed research conducted by Olivera Petrovich. In the description of the video, there are 4 links. The first is to a referenced essay on the same topic, hosted on iERA's One Reason website. The next is a link to Justin Barrett's previously discussed book, followed by a broken link to a YouTube video in which a Christian apologist attempted to use Petrovich for their own argument. Last of all, we have a generic link to the London Dawah Facebook page. So when Sabor Ahmed states that they will link her research down below, we are left with the conclusion that it must be the first and third link. So let's start with the blog article before moving on to the video. Said blog article does give a reference to a supposed work by Olivera Petrovich titled Child's Theory of World. The problem? Child's Theory of World, another non-peer-reviewed book, was supposed to be published in 2008, but was cancelled. So even though this blog was originally written in 2012 and this video published a year later, they still referenced it as a source. Now either the book was not out but still expected, in which case they had no right to reference what hadn't been published and they had not yet read, or more likely the book was already cancelled and they simply hadn't done any form of fact-checking. This fact is made all the more likely by the video. Thankfully I have screenshots of the description from before it was removed. Here the only source which it gave for its claims was a link to the Friendly Atheist page discussing the topic. Here the Friendly Atheist made reference to an article hosted on the Age National. Now since another blog hosted on the Age National contained the title used in the One Reason blog post, I don't find it all too unlikely that they just grabbed said title without doing even the most basic of checks, let alone actually reading a book which again had not been published. But even if said book had been published, considering Petrovich's conflict of interest in also being funded by the John Templeton Foundation, not to mention complete lack of peer review, it would still lack the requirements for valid evidence because a non-peer-reviewed book is not a study. Now in later essays, other iERA members such as Hamza Sorcius changed the reference to a journal article, in which Petrovich discusses the complications in studying religion. The article does not touch upon the nature of belief beyond the discussion on how to study it. In fact, the only published piece by Petrovich to be vaguely relevant was a talk description in a conference journal, aka a timetable of the talks on offer at said conference. This is the only piece published by Petrovich to discuss her work, and it is a single paragraph that fails to disclose the intricacies of her work or the specifics of her findings. The research cannot be referenced because it does not exist beyond some vague mentions of it scattered across the internet.
So to sum it up, what we're trying to get across is that we do not need any rational logical arguments to prove the existence of God. We don't need these things to warrant us in believing in the existence of God.
Okay. Before we end the show, say if somebody watching this video goes and they speak to a friend of theirs, a colleague of theirs, say someone who's agnostic or an atheist,
Yes.
and they say to them, belief in God is natural, and give them sort of explanations that we give, and the person says, well, that's just based on blind faith.
Yes.
You're just you're just basically coming up with a concept and saying, oh, it's just something I don't need to prove, and anything else that we have in life has to be proven.
Yes.
Right? How would that person respond
Well,
to
you
this?
could tell that this person has a scientific sort of inclination. They go from that perspective, right? You could tell them this, look, you believe in science, or you follow science, it's a good method. Do you know that science is also based on an assumption, a properly basic belief, which you can't prove? The real world exists. This is an assumption, an axiom that science accepts. Can't prove it. It doesn't have to prove
Axiom?
it. Axiom meaning an assumption, base assumption that doesn't require any evidence.
Okay, sure.
Right? So it can't prove this, but it accepts it, and it's completely rational to accept that. In the same way, it's completely rational to accept the existence of God.
Okay. Very good.
It's a properly basic belief as well, just
Very
like that
good.
belief.
So, Jazakallah khair for the explanation on that. For anyone watching, if you want any more information on what we just spoke about, please go to the links that we've put in the videos and tune in for the rest of the shows where we're going to be going over more arguments for God's existence and other related topics. See you then. Assalamu alaikum.
Except the statement that the real world exists is a true, properly basic belief in that it's self-verifying. Even if this perceived universe is fake, there must in fact be a real one in which my brain is sat in a vat or a computer is running a complex algorithm. Meanwhile, the notion that it is this universe is a foundational assumption which is based in necessity and the fact that said claim is the least assumption burden position. Meanwhile, your belief in God has been shown to be neither of those things, and thus has been shown to not be a properly basic belief in any sense of the term discussed. Therefore, all we can actually conclude from this video is that you have to provide valid evidence of your claims in asserting the existence of a deity, something which I highly doubt you will do anytime soon. There are a few things which I'd just like to add here at the end of this video. The first is a massive thank you to everyone who has ever donated to me via Patreon. Your fantastic support has given me the ability to keep this channel going, and I hope to continue producing content in the years to come. Secondly, I would like to thank anyone who has ever interacted with this channel. Your shares, likes and dislikes, as well as your comments of both approval and disapproval, have ensured constant feedback allowing me to improve my work. Last of all, I would like to express my desire that you treat any of the people displayed throughout the video with respect. Whilst it is true that ideas do not demand respect, and there are many in fact which deserve reprehension, we must be careful on how we tackle said ideas in ensuring we are not simply targeting the person. In short, be the compassionate side of reason. So take care, and I'll see you next time.